I have been collecting video games for around 13 years or so, and I've accumulated a fair share of titles and consoles that I enjoy. Now, I personally don't go for the complete in-box collection since the prices of these are just insane. I'm more into just picking up nostalgic titles and games I will actually play. Needless to say, it's a hobby that I've invested a lot of time into, and recently this hobby's been getting much more popular, especially with the ongoing scandal regarding DK Oldies and the market manipulation with Wata Games. It seems with all the attention surrounding older video games, the hobby is becoming less feasible for younger generations. So I want to chat about some of the downsides to retro video game collecting and what I think its future holds. For starters, the first downside to collecting video games is pricing. I'm sure everyone remembers a time when a set of games for a console were worth next to nothing compared to what they are worth now, and this usually happens to a lot of things in life just due to age and rarity, but retro video game collecting is definitely more affected by these price changes, mainly because of how insane some of them are. I mean, just looking at modern day video game prices is pretty sad if you don't already have a collection, because your average person can't afford these prices being asked. Just taking a peek at GameShark pricing for GameCube is probably enough to deter most people, especially if you're wanting a complete in-box collection. Which sucks, because the only way collecting for certain consoles is oftentimes affordable is when you buy them loose. But for me personally, buying just the disc is not very satisfying compared to having the case as well. Now, in all fairness, purchasing loose games for consoles like the N64 just isn't as bad since the cartridges are more substantial than a flimsy small disc, but in general, buying loose games is just never as satisfying. Which leads me into my second downside of collecting, which is sealed and graded games. To me, buying loose is still better than buying sealed. I will never pay more for a sealed game solely because I want to enjoy my games and actually play them. Spending triple or more on a sealed game to have it sit in a protector on your bookshelf just doesn't make much sense to me. I get that some people see these games as art and choose to showcase them in their perfect form, but spending an insane amount on something to have it left sealed on your bookshelf is just not what I want. Although the concept of sealed games does have a small upside, since most of the people who purchase games for the sake of profiting usually opt for sealed and graded games, which is fine by me so long as it doesn't touch the price of open copies. I would never purchase a game with the intent of trying to profit off it in the future, but sadly there is a lot of people who do that and they ruin the market for everyone. So by moving these people to the sealed and graded market, there's a lot more supply going around. My last and final downside for retro collecting is resellers. Now, most resellers are good people and just want to make some extra cash for their own collections, but there are still a lot of terrible resellers that make the hobby a nightmare. What I mean by this is the people who sit on Facebook Marketplace and wait for parents to get rid of cheap video game lots. Once they get the video game items, they instantly relist them for prices over market, oftentimes not selling and just collecting dust. And I feel like this is really common due to YouTube channels like Pixel Squad and Retro Rick, who buy video games for cheap and flip them to fund their own collections. But the thing is, these guys have online stores like eBay where they sell their stuff, whereas the people buying locally just accumulate tons of video game items and list it for insane prices that usually never end up selling. And now, to be fair, this can also be applied to video game stores, as some are just too greedy. Like for example, where I live there are two video game stores, and both pay about 50 to 60% market value for video games, but the difference between them is one store sells the games for 90 to 95% of eBay solds, while the other lists them for about 125% of what they're actually worth. And this means inventory in the first store is constantly moving through, while the second store just accumulates a ton of video games that are overpriced. Stuff like this in general just ruins the hobby because games aren't being played or even let alone sold, and people aren't wanting to pay way over market price even if the video game is local. So in general, video game collecting in 2023 is tough, and I would only really recommend it to someone who has a lot of money and long-term interest in it. As many have said, it's best to collect for systems that are cheap now, which as of the making of this video would be the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. But if you're wanting NES, SNES, GBA, N64, or any of those other Nintendo systems, you will be paying a lot out of pocket. And who knows, maybe in 10 years from now, a lot of people will lose interest in older consoles like the N64 as they don't have nostalgia for them anymore, causing prices to drop. But it's really tough to say since old Atari stuff is still pretty damn expensive. Anyways, I'm going to end the video there before this turns into a super long rant, but I just want to say I appreciate you for watching till the end. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.